using Zoom to get to Canberra to catch up with Caroline Fisher, who's an Associate Professor of Journalism and in fact runs the journalism program at the University of Canberra. Welcome to the program. Welcome to The Informer.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Look, a very important time in our lives. We've got so much going on. The world has been stalled and disrupted by a global pandemic. We've had an American election that's only just been decided, and we now know that America has a new president, and it will be President-elect Joe Biden. And we have also heard some fabulous news out of Iran that an academic who's been in detention for the better part of 800 days has been released. So there is some good news. There is some good news coming about.
Yes, there is.
But can we place our trust and faith in some of the news services that we go to each day to get that daily dose of news and what's happening?
It's a very good question, and it's a question that we ask Australian news consumers every year. We conduct an annual survey called the Digital News Report Australia, and we ask consumers what is their view of news and can they trust it. And trust in news in Australia is falling. So we run the survey at the same time every year, the end of January, beginning of February. And this year, only 38% of Australians said that they trust most news most of the time. So that's a general perception of trust of news offerings generally. There's slightly higher trust in the news that people, subscribe to themselves. That is higher, around 46%. But overall, trust in news in Australia is quite low.
Why is that, Caroline? I can remember a time when the news of the day, you had to wait for it. It was either 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Why have we gone from really committed news viewers and what we saw we believe to this situation today? What's happened?
Look, there's no one single answer to this, but what's happened is that the information environment has become much more complicated. So we now have what we call a hybrid media system, where we've got these traditional mass media platforms like TV and newspapers, old-fashioned stuff, and then we've got all of these new digital news and information offerings. And that's really complicated the space, and it means that there are sources of information available now to people that are less reliable than they used to be. And there's some research coming out now that sort of shows that the rise in digital offerings, that there's sort of a following kind of decline in trust in news generally. So it's this complication, this big digital space where there's a lot of unreliable information available, and that is complicating perceptions of what is news, what is reliable news.
So as one falls, there's this new news, as you talk about, that takes up that space. That must be extraordinarily, what's the word I want? Distracting. For the real news gatherers, I can remember a time, and it wasn't that long ago, when we didn't have the smartphones, we didn't have the internet, and we waited all day for the satellites to deliver the news. And of course, it took the journalists 3, 4, 5 hours to finish the product. So at the end of the day, at 5, 6, 7 o'clock, you got a complete story. Today, we don't get very many complete stories to air. In fact, I labour to think of 1 or 2, unless it's an emergency that's just happened or an accident and we have the full story in the can. They're basically developing stories all day, every day. So when we go to air at 5 or 6 or 7 or 9, people don't really know what they're seeing. And even the journalists themselves are only telling you bits of that story. So that hasn't helped the situation, I would have thought.
No, quality is also an issue. I mean, there's, like I say, it's a complex kind of amalgam of a whole range of factors. I mean, the digital environment is one of them. The other is, yes, about journalism quality and a perception of a decline in journalism quality, and this hamster wheel, this 24-hour, rolling deadline, the bottomless pit for digital content, journalists constantly filing, and that's right, a story's never complete. It's just always developing. So it's that, that saying that, it was right at the time of publication, and things are corrected on the run, instead of all the fact checking done beforehand. Things that really bother people, when we ask people specifically about, why don't you trust the news, or why do you trust the news? Things that really contribute to perceptions of low trust are things like bias, partisanship, commercial and political interests, perceptions of conflict of interest, sensationalism. These are the sorts of things that audiences say they don't like. And when we ask them what would improve your trust in news, they say exactly that: remove bias, remove conflict of interest, be more transparent, don't be so sensational, do more in-depth reporting. So they're the responses that we get about how to help fix the trust problem.
Caroline, one of the things I want to ask you is, where and who do you think are the trusted news sources, and what do you think makes them more trustworthy than the others?
Our research shows that the most trusted news brands in Australia are the public broadcasters. So the ABC is top of the pops for trust, followed by SBS, and then, in fact, the BBC in the UK, again, a public broadcaster. After that, it's the traditional news brands, and TV dominates. So TV as a traditional platform is more trusted than newspapers, etc. When it comes to online news brands, then news.com features quite highly. But it is the independent public broadcasters that are the most trusted. And when we ask people about the importance of independence in journalism, etc., 2/3 of Australians say that independent journalism is very important, and that they actually want impartial news. So about 52% of people say that they want impartial news. They don't want news that reinforces their worldview or challenges it either, I've got to say. But most people say that they want impartial news, and that they think that independence is very important for quality journalism. And so independent journalism is vital. And without it, honestly, if any news organisation that is putting commercial or partisan interests ahead of the public interest, arguably is not doing its job.
Look, when you say things like that, and I've been in the game for the better part of 40 years, I smile not only on the inside, because it gives me hope that there'll be more people demanding even more quality. If we have some of the best skilled young men and women coming out of universities, they should be better trained, and I know they're better trained, but they need to be in capable hands. And as we know, in those early formative years, you also need some tough mentors who can remind you that yes, that was the right tactic, but at the same time there are other ways to do that story. And that for me is what's missing in the big news agencies at the moment, and we need to discover them. We need to find a way to replenish that lost IP, and that I think would give us tremendous positive for the next 5 to 10 years, because Lord knows we need it. The one thing I hate is if it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. I've heard those stories time and time again. We've heard about ambulance chasing news items. I want all those tags to go to by the by, in other words, fall by the side, because importantly, the news that matters, you'll hear people saying, if it's not local, I don't want to know about it. And for me, all news is local, depending on your perspective.
Well, it's interesting actually, when local news is more trusted than news generally, and particularly international news. So people do trust local news more, and I suspect it's because there is that proximity, and people go, "Yeah, I was there. Actually, that account of it is true."
Caroline Fisher, can I just say once again, thank you very much. I understand you've had a personal emergency in the background. I hope things go very well, and there's very good news to come for the rest of the day. But we really appreciate your commitment this morning and your support, and giving us a sense of just how important good news really is to each and every one of us. Thank you so much.